Hi, I'm Jess Brooks and I'm the Farmland Biodiversity Advisor at the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust. I look after 2 farmer clusters in the UK. I'm currently speaking from my family farm on the Isle of Wight, where I was brought up, and I have a background in farming and conservation. So when talking about farmer clusters, we must remember that these clusters are made up of people, and no 2 people are the same. So the word farmer is used quite broadly here to refer to many different types of land managers who live and work on land. And some farmers will make their living from the land and produce food, but others may not, and may not even be involved with the everyday activities on the farm. So as an example, one of my cluster members is actually a super yacht broker, all right for some, who lives in Monaco, and he owns a farm here, but the farm work is contracted out. So that's a very different scenario to another member of my cluster in Dorset, who manages a 400-hectare mixed livestock and arable farm by himself and gets by on 4 hours sleep a night. So the appetite of those 2 very different people to improve biodiversity and work with their neighbours in a cluster might be the same, but the mechanism by which you work with them will be different. So the bottom line is that you are dealing with a broad spectrum of personalities, farm types and business models as well. One of the biggest problems is that there's an absence of trust between farmers and other entities such as the government and the public as well. And we find that the whole conversation about farming and the environment is very negative. There are also quite large gaps in the knowledge of farmers and about what wildlife they have on their farms, how it's increasing or how it's decreasing, and why that is important. Agri-environment schemes at the moment don't really incentivise enough farmers financially. They're not monitored, and they don't necessarily offer positive feedback and encouragement either about what the farmers are doing. So farmers in that kind of setting and landscape will never be inspired to do more if they feel unappreciated and they feel persecuted. The system of farming that we have, the political, the industrial landscape, is very top-down, and it's full of blockers. We have a lot of rules, we have a lot of inspection limits, payment delays, we have a heavy admin load on farmers nowadays. So they are under enormous pressure from the government, from the media, from the public, and from environmental organisations. So with all of these mental and physical burdens on their time, it's no wonder that conservation and biodiversity and the environment feels like another thing to add to the long list of things they have to think about and do. But what we find with farmer clusters is that it kind of flips the whole thing around onto its head. A farmer cluster is an enabler. So by joining up with neighbours, choosing a trusted professional environmental advisor to work with them, it instantly puts in place a support network for farmers. It's a source of advice, a place for them to be creative, to get inspiration. So the culture of a farmer cluster is totally different from this top-down EU system. It's an enabling type of way of working. Very difficult for them to understand the success of what they're doing, because there is quite an absence of this positive feedback and encouragement and monitoring of what they're doing. Everyone's kind of struggling in isolation rather than working together and being cooperative. It's a big problem. So, you know, the default position is for everybody to work individually on their own farms at a farm level, and there's only so much biodiversity improvement that can be done working like that. Wildlife doesn't know boundaries. Rivers run through more than one farm. So working at landscape scale is essential, and everyone on this call knows that. That's why we're here. So to avoid these problems, to help them succeed, we need to communicate with farmers better. We need to understand their psychology, support them better, give them more credit, hold them up a bit, stop farmer bashing, and give them more free opportunities for learning and training. So those are all the core activities of a farmer cluster. So the values and the motives for farming include pride in being a steward of land, producing quality food, being a good business person, making a profit to support a family, respect for tradition, the lifestyle, and a love and knowledge of the land and the local area that they're in. So motives for conservation and entering stewardship agreements include a concern for future generations, peer pressure from the industry, but also their neighbours as well, pressure from science, government, the media, scientists, the public. Other incentives would be topping up farm income with agri-environment schemes, making money from unproductive areas of the farm, and just generally a love and a knowledge of the wildlife that's on the farm. And then the fact that you bring nostalgia into it. Many farms have observed declines in wildlife in their lifetimes, and they want to do something about that. I would say the importance of a healthy, profitable farm or family business cannot be overstated when talking about farmers' motivations. And you don't become a food producer to get rich, do you? Some farmers live hand to mouth. They don't have a cent to invest in better ways of doing things and use technologies. And as a general rule, farmers often say to me, we will struggle to be green and environmental if our bank statement is in the red. So I think that kind of commonality is all to do with keeping their head above water in this challenging landscape. Someone's attitude to all this and conservation will depend on several things: the health of their business, their education, their personality in quite a lot of ways, their knowledge, their creativity. But there's no real set template, as I said before, for a farmer. They're all very, very different people. So someone, as an example, someone entering the industry might embrace new technology. They might have rather a different attitude to, say, a farming family that's been doing things the same way for decades and has set traditions and ways of doing things. So they would be very different scenarios. Some farmers have positive attitudes to looking after the environment and believe it's an essential and integral part of their business, and others see the environment as a separate thing or an optional duty. And then the final kind of thing to say would be there's a lot of negative public publicity directed at farming in terms of biodiversity, environmental impact, and this means that farmers kind of have a negative attitude towards the government and the public because of that. They're quite cynical. A lot of them are distrustful and disillusioned. But farmer clusters, on the other hand, again, flipping it around, they are a mini positive community. They're a bottom-up way of working based on trust and support and knowledge. So they certainly have potential to convert a negative attitude into a positive attitude. So my top tip would be to forget the outcomes that you want and start with the farmers. Understand their psychology. You need to know what their blockers are, but also what excites them as well. And the key to the success of farmer clusters is getting to know people, building trust and forming relationships. Once you've made good progress with that, the conservation work will follow.